Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Data Centers Moving Towards 24/7 Carbon-Free Electricity. Let's get started. My name is John Collell, and I'm the co-founder and chief commercial officer at Flexidao. For those of you who don't know, Flexidao is a global service provider focused on helping companies move towards 24/7 carbon-free electricity. We do that by monitoring and certifying that the electricity consumed is matched with carbon-free sources every hour of the day. Today, I have the privilege to be moderating an impressive panel of experts. So let me introduce you to Brian Denver, EU Energy Markets Lead at Google, Taylor Lydon, Program Manager, EMEA Energy and Sustainability at Microsoft, and last but not least, Chris Pennington, Director of Energy and Sustainability Iron Mountain. It's a pleasure to have you here today, guys.
Thank you, John. Great to be here.
Thanks, John. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. And we have an audience from all around the world, Asia Pacific, Africa, Europe, and United States. Energy consultants, energy suppliers, energy buyers, and a whole bunch of industry members that have interest in learning more about 24/7 carbon-free electricity today. So let me start by just giving a brief context of what we are talking about. We all know we need to accelerate the decarbonization of electricity grids. And we're also hearing that companies need to improve the transparency and credibility of their carbon emissions. 24/7 carbon-free electricity can be an answer to these challenges. And for this reason, it has been promoted by public administrations, such as the US Federal Administration, intergovernmental organizations, such as United Nations, and private corporations, like Google, Microsoft, and Iron Mountain that we have today in our panel. So today's session's objective is to hear some real examples of 24/7 carbon-free electricity projects. We will be discussing why they are relevant, and we will be sharing some practical advice for any organization to get started in this journey. The session will last about an hour, and you can leave any questions you might have for the panelists in the chat. We will dedicate the last 15 minutes to address Q&A. So before we get started, what is 24/7 carbon-free electricity exactly? Well, as United Nations describes it, 24/7 carbon-free electricity means that every kilowatt hour of electricity consumption is met with carbon-free electricity sources every hour of the day, everywhere. It's therefore an aspiration to really reflect the carbon content of the electricity that companies buy. So let us now hear some real 24/7 stories. Brian, at Google, you've announced a 24/7 carbon-free energy goal by 2030. Could you please explain us more about this goal and what are your ongoing projects?
Absolutely. Yeah. And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, Flexidao, for organizing this webinar on what we think is a really exciting topic. And it's great to see so much interest here. So yes, absolutely. As you mentioned, Google's goal is to operate on carbon-free energy in all places and at all times by 2030, which means matching our demand at our data centers and offices in every hour with carbon-free energy from the same grid. And this builds on our 100% annual renewable energy match milestone, which we first achieved back in 2017. And there are a variety of reasons why we believe a 24/7 carbon-free energy goal is the right next step in our energy journey, and actually why we think it's the right next step for a lot of other energy buyers. But I would say fundamentally, it's really about impact. We want to pursue a clean energy procurement strategy that has the most transformational impact in decarbonizing the grids where we operate. So Google has been at the forefront of corporate clean energy procurement. We have around 6 gigawatts of solar and wind projects under contract. And as we grow that portfolio going forward, we want to make sure it's delivering the most that it can in terms of emission reductions, in terms of innovation, and in terms of full-scale grid decarbonization. And I guess you can ask, how do we know that 24/7 carbon-free energy is in fact the path which maximizes impact? And there are two ways we know this. The first is because we've already seen its impact in action already ourselves through the 24/7 deals we've done. And we've actually published some data on this in a paper, which is on our website, on the methodology we use for 24/7, where you can see how this sort of strategy contributes to greater emission reductions. And the second is because we have independent analysis now that has demonstrated just how much impact 24/7 strategies have. And as an example of that, I would really encourage you all to read a recent paper published by the Princeton University Zero Lab, which has looked at the system level impacts of 24/7 carbon-free electricity procurement. And this study confirms that hourly same grid clean energy procurement delivers greater system emission reductions than an annual renewable energy matching strategy. There are bigger emission reductions, faster retirement of fossil fuel assets, and also it supports that technology innovation as well. And I can give, you mentioned examples, Joanne. I could give an example of how this works in practice using one of Google's recent deals. So last May, Google announced our first 24/7 carbon-free energy deal with AES in the US PJM market. It consisted of a portfolio of 500 megawatts of wind, solar, battery storage, and hydro projects, which together will guarantee that our data center in Virginia will operate on 90% carbon-free energy by 2024. Now, in the past, what we would have done was we'd go to the market and seek to execute individual renewable power purchase agreements to deliver a certain volume of renewable energy. And we can assume that that probably would have meant that we'd simply contract with 4 or 5 solar farms to supply these volumes, say, given that solar PV is typically, it has the lowest levelized cost across PJM. And so that would be the easiest way to get those volumes. But because with the 24/7 approach, we care about when those projects are producing, and because our data centers are always using electricity, we instead ended up with this mixed portfolio of wind and solar, hydro and storage, which can somewhat complement each other's generation. So, and this is key, I think, by bringing this 24/7 mindset to that deal, we're able to support a portfolio of technologies that actually brings more value to the grid and avoids overdevelopment and overdependence on one particular technology. So that's it. I'd say the main reason we've chosen this path is impact. I do want to quickly mention a couple of other important reasons why we've chosen it. There are other benefits to 24/7. As you mentioned at the start, Joanne, 24/7 will allow us to deliver our operations in a way that's genuinely carbon-free, which is good for us, it's good for our customers. It also drives innovation, and innovation is part of Google's DNA as a technology company. So we're working with, we need to think about storage and flexibility and firm carbon-free resources. So we're helping to commercialize these technologies. And finally, we've chosen 24/7 because we feel we have a responsibility as a large global energy consumer to act on climate change, to leverage our experience and expertise and influence and decarbonize grids as fast as possible.
Thanks, Brian. Very insightful. Let me hand over to Taylor. Taylor, Microsoft has also announced a 100-100-0 goal. Can you explain what that means and what was your underlying motivation?
Sure. So, hey everyone, hi Joanne, and thanks again for Flexidao for hosting this webinar and really pushing this conversation forward in the market. So, from Microsoft's perspective, all of this relates to our carbon negative science-based targets goals. So in 2020, we announced that by 2030, we would be carbon negative on an annual basis. And by 2050, we will be net zero over Microsoft's entire existence since 1975. So really here we want to remove carbon from the atmosphere. We want to decarbonize our operations as quickly as possible. And we want to do this to meet the moment because we recognize that we're in a climate crisis. We need to avoid carbon emissions so that we do not exceed a 2-degree Celsius warming threshold and reach those catastrophic climate outcomes. So Microsoft recently, as of July of last year, announced its 100-100-0 goal, which means 100% carbon-free electricity, 100% of the time, which is effectively a 24/7 carbon-free energy goal. And so really with that goal, what we're trying to do is increase the impact of our annual renewable energy purchases. So for example, last year, Microsoft purchased 6 gigawatts or contracted for 6 gigawatts of renewable energy. But really what we want to do is start looking at the impact of those megawatt hours and making sure they're having the decarbonization impact and aligning with an ultimate decarbonization of the entire grid goal. So there are two real ways that I'd say that Microsoft's committing to this 100-100-0 goal is really going to move the needle on grid decarbonization. So first is accelerating innovation. So how do we look at, hours where the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing? How do we get to carbon-free electricity in those hours? The answer is we need new tech, we need new business models, and we need those to be available cheaply and at scale. And so Microsoft contracting in these types of projects with partners like AES. So we've recently announced a project in PJM with AES where we're bringing Microsoft contracted PPAs, new carbon-free electricity, and new lithium-ion batteries into a portfolio to get to 24/7 carbon-free electricity. So entering into projects like that helps accelerate adoption of new technology, bring these tech down the cost curve. And then the second way that we think Microsoft is going to drive impact here is by building tools that others can use to also enter into carbon-free energy deals. So, for example, Microsoft has worked with one of our key partners in Sweden called Vattenfall to build a 24/7 energy supply agreement on Azure that matches our hourly load with carbon-free electricity in the market and that we have contracted through PPAs. Now, this product is built on Azure. Microsoft Cloud is the anchor tenant or the anchor off-taker of that type of deal, but now it's offered to other Vattenfall customers in the market. So by doing that, by really enabling the tools that we can build on Microsoft Cloud, on Microsoft's platform, we can really accelerate adoption of these types of products and multiply the effect that we have in the market by adoption by other customers as well.
Thanks, Taylor. Chris, let me hand over to you. So Iron Mountain is different than Google and Microsoft. You're a co-location data center business. Can you explain a bit more what your business is about and why you also entered into a 24/7 carbon-free energy goal?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity to come and share our story here on this really important topic. So Iron Mountain may not have quite the name recognition that Microsoft or Google has. So I'll take just a brief moment and introduce our business. It began over 70 years ago now with storing critical vital documents in underground facilities. So since day one, our business has always been about security and preserving the assets that matter most to our clients. That's what our business is built on. Over time, our business moved above ground. We have a global portfolio of facilities that do record storage. That has changed with the digital transformation that we're all experiencing. And today we have a fairly large portfolio of data centers. And our data center business is what's known mostly as a co-location type business. So for our facilities, we construct the four walls. We make sure that these facilities have robust power systems and rich connections to the internet. And then our customers come and set up their own critical IT equipment inside our facilities. So we're providing the shell in a much more efficient and cost-effective way than what customers could replicate on their own. The function of the building and the usage of energy inside the building belongs to our customers. So in essence, the energy consumed at Iron Mountain data centers mostly is not our energy, it's our customers' energy. So rolling the clock back a little bit to 2018, we did set a 100% renewable energy commitment through the RE100 commitment. We also have an approved science-based target that we've established for greenhouse gas emissions. And we recognize that our energy footprint is really important to our clients because we are part of their energy supply chain. We've been 100% renewable energy at our facility since 2017 for the data centers. And last year, we were looking for ways to move beyond and continue to make an impact, similar to what both Brian and Taylor have talked about at Microsoft and at Google. And we were inspired by the work that Google had done to really commit to matching every hour of their consumption with an hour of locally produced clean energy. And so recognizing that we are a provider of energy to our clients inside our facilities, and recognizing that this is an impactful way to make further progress towards decarbonizing, and that our customers may be adopting this goal, we proactively embrace the opportunity to adopt this goal ourselves. So last year in 2021, we published our goal to match every hour of every day with clean energy by the year 2040. And we saw the opportunity to align with the work that Google had done to define the methodology for how to approach it and how to track progress. And so we specifically referred to their approach as the way that we were also going to pursue 24/7 clean energy. So that's a bit of why we're in this space, because we recognize that we're actually providing power to our clients, and we want to provide them the power that they would choose to buy on their own. I think that they will choose to buy on their own going forward in order to further help decarbonize the grid.
Thanks, Chris. So that was a fantastic opportunity to hear different approaches to the same objective from the industry. And after this context, many people from the audience might be thinking, well, I already have established a 100% renewable energy goal. I might have science-based targets. So how does 24/7 carbon-free electricity strategy fit in all of that? Taylor, do you think they can both coexist today?
Yeah, so I think this is a good question. To be clear, Microsoft has both a 100% annual renewable energy goal by 2025 and a 100% hourly carbon-free energy goal by 2030. So those are both coexisting at Microsoft today. And what we really see is that our annual goals and the procurement that has helped us reach those and is helping us reach those are really the first step in achieving our 2030 100% hourly carbon-free energy goals. And so what I mean by that is, for example, Johan, you know this, but Microsoft has done a pilot with Flexidao in the Netherlands. It's been Flexidao, CertiQ, and Eneco. And what we did in that pilot was look at a wind asset and how it matched up with the consumption at one of our data center facilities. So what we found through that pilot is that even though there was overproduction on an annual basis, we were 78% matched on an hourly basis. So we have gotten a significant part of the way there with just those annual based renewable energy purchases. And what we really need to do is drive insights and figure out how to get to that next, the gaps that we have in our hourly carbon-free energy. And so we really see the 24/7 carbon-free energy goal as building impact, driving additional impact in the market, and really aligning our procurement with the needs of the grid and in a way that is going to help accelerate decarbonization of the grid. So I think there are 2 points that I'll make here about how we think these carbon-free energy goals are helping drive and accelerate decarbonization of the grid. So first is just simply by driving scale into new technology and new business models that's going to help lower transaction barriers, lower costs, and create accessibility so more and more people can contract with new technology with 24/7 carbon-free energy type of products. And then second is creating more efficient markets. So right now, when we buy a clean megawatt hour from a project, that clean megawatt hour doesn't differentiate between hours where the grid is extremely clean and hours where the grid is extremely dirty. So presumably in the hour where the grid is extremely dirty, that megawatt hour is going to have a greater carbon abatement impact than the clean megawatt hour from the other hour. So essentially, if we're moving from an annual based megawatt hour to an hourly megawatt hour, we're able to drive more efficient price signals, more efficient markets where in hours where the grid is dirty, there might be higher value for those clean megawatt hours, and that can help incentivize new technology to be driven into the market when and where we really need it. So yeah, those are the two key reasons I think we should really be driving scale into this carbon-free energy goal to drive impact.
Thanks, Taylor. So we've been talking a lot now about the environmental benefits of 24/7. Brian, let's look at for a second at the economics. Can a 24/7 carbon-free electricity strategy be commercially advantageous for a business?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I guess before, in my previous answer, I spoke about impact, and both Taylor and Chris mentioned it as well. And I think impact really has to be the primary motivator for pursuing a clean energy strategy, whether it's through renewable power purchase agreements or on-site generation or even just purchasing RECs. Fundamentally, your clean energy procurement strategy is about reducing the emission impacts of your operations. But it's a good question because I know there will be energy and sustainability managers on this webinar probably who are thinking, okay, well, 24/7 sounds great, but we need to persuade the leadership in our organization that a 24/7 strategy makes good business sense in order to get that buy-in from the top. And there I would say we clearly see these benefits from 24/7 as well. So one of the advantages, a quite well-established advantage of renewable power purchase agreements for energy buyers is that they help mitigate energy price risks by serving as a form of price hedge. So we're living through a period in Europe at the moment of extremely high electricity prices, and undoubtedly renewable power purchase agreements are helping many companies to reduce their exposure to the very volatile spot markets and provide some level of certainty. And we see that this advantage is actually even greater with hourly carbon-free energy matching. And that's because hourly matching helps to mitigate what's known as shape risk that's associated with traditional PPAs. So this mismatch between renewable purchases and consumption in a given settlement period that has to be compensated for. And it also helps with another form of risk, cannibalization risks. So the risk that renewable PPAs earn less attractive financial revenues as more renewables are deployed on the system generating in the same hours. And so this approach, it sort of helps to bring about the resources that are needed most. And I will say that in terms of the cost of delivering 24/7 matching versus 100% renewable match, what we've seen in the analysis from the likes of the Princeton Zero Lab is that a 24/7 approach does typically today come with some cost premium to simple annual matching. However, it comes with a much greater emissions abatement impact, and that's really crucial. And also that analysis has shown that this cost premium can be significantly reduced if you use a full portfolio of clean, firm resources. And it's also our expectation that the costs for consumers of entering into these sort of 24/7 supply agreements will come down significantly as more and more energy suppliers develop 24/7 type supply offerings for customers, like the ones that utilities like AES in the US or ENGIE in Europe have constructed. So yes, I think there's a very strong case.
Thanks, Brian. Indeed, risk mitigation is a great point. I've also heard from some companies show interest in hourly matching to prepare ahead for future carbon taxes or carbon regulations. In Europe, for instance, the Renewable Energy Directive 2 already mentions hourly matching as a certification requirement for renewable fuels of non-biological origin. So this could be a reality in the future for other industries. So it's a fantastic point to also take into consideration risk mitigation aspects. Chris, so let's talk about how do we move from strategy to implementation? Does 24/7 mean that companies have to match 100% with carbon-free energy sources from day one?
It is going to be a journey, I think, that looks and feels a bit different than commitments that companies may have made to RE100, as an example. As Brian outlined, really procurement is the mechanism by which we can drive impact and make this change and achieve these goals. And so the journey really begins with understanding where you're starting from and where you're at today. So our journey towards actually implementing this goal was first to try and get our arms around how well matched we are today to our existing clean energy contracts. And this data analysis can be a little difficult to kind of get your arms around and get all the data that you need. But once you do, and once you partner with companies like Flexidao, which is helping us understand our matching, you start to identify the hours of the day that are unmatched by clean energy. And you start to see how big they are and how often they exist and whether or not they're seasonal. And that then becomes the direction for where you go and look for the additional new technology solutions that Taylor mentioned, or the different source of generation assets, whether it be adding more wind or solar into your portfolio. So it is a journey. The journey begins with understanding where you are to start, and then you can build from there.
Totally agree, Chris, that it's a journey. So companies should not be scared to hear 24/7 carbon-free energy, because you can start with the lower hourly match today and work towards it. And also, if I may add, from a reporting point of view, if there's any company that reports into CDP, let me highlight that hourly matching is something that can be added in a voluntary comment section. There's points 5, 6, and 8.2e of the CDP report allow you to add any voluntary comments. So any company can also add those kind of actions there. And also from a standards point of view, it's true that there's no hourly certificates that are recognized at the moment, but there are nonprofits such as Energy Tag that are working to create these standards in coordination or in link to the current energy attribute certificate system. So I think that's also something relevant to highlight.
Yeah, and I'll add on to there, Johan, because you made a great point there, that you don't necessarily need to start this journey by understanding completely where you're at today. We didn't, for example, when we started this journey, we knew it was important to start recognizing getting access to when clean energy is being generated and when we're using it and how well these match up. So we just simply started talking to our retail providers saying, we want access to this data. And we even last year, when we did our retail agreement in the UK, we embedded a clause that said, when Energy Tag supported tracking is available, we want it to exist in our contract. So we were planting seeds for solutions that hadn't fully matured yet, but they're embedded in our agreements. So I think procurement's a very powerful way to drive impact and change. And even if you may not know exactly where you're going, you can start putting the pieces in there that will help you down the road.
That's very inspiring, Chris, and I hope that also motivates any company that is listening today to consider starting in this journey. And you mentioned the topic of energy suppliers. Let me ask you, Taylor, also from your perspective, what practical advice would you give to any energy buyer when tendering if they try to go on this 24/7 journey?
Sure. So I want to say upfront here that Microsoft has used 24/7 energy supply agreements across our portfolio, and it's a tool that we think is going to meaningfully move the needle moving forward towards 2030. But there's no one size fits all approach here. So it's going to look different in each market based on the market structure, based on the generation availability in that market, based on the counterparties that you're working with. So I'd say I'll talk to our experience, but I think this is going to really look different in different places globally, and that's what we're finding currently. So back in 2019, Microsoft announced a pilot 24/7 energy supply agreement with Vattenfall, and then we signed up to it full-time for our data center region in Sweden. And essentially what that project is a tracking platform built on Azure that looks at Microsoft's hourly consumption and Microsoft's hourly PPA generation, and then Vattenfall's hourly hydro production. And Vattenfall uses that insight to fill in the gaps of where wind might not be producing in a certain hour to deliver 24/7 carbon-free electricity to Microsoft. And so what this platform really does is drive a ton of transparency into our hourly supply. It also pulls in data pipelines around carbon, like hourly carbon emissions, and it stamps the carbon impact of each clean megawatt hour onto that megawatt hour. So we're starting to equate carbon impact with clean megawatt hours through that platform. And really, I mean, I think the key point here is it's a scalable product. So Vattenfall now sells through this product to other customers. Microsoft buys through it. And it's been a meaningful and powerful way to really track our hourly supply. Now, I'd say for folks in the audience who are looking for practical advice, there are probably a couple of different pieces I would give. So first, for buyers, what I'm not saying here is that like each buyer needs to go and build a new tech platform with their retailer. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there are more of these products coming into the market that are enabled by both, savvy energy providers and by companies like Flexidao, who offer a platform that can work with energy providers to provide those insights. So the more demand that is demonstrated in the market for these types of solutions, the more that we'll be able to see, the easier they'll be able to transact with. And so when tendering, I'd say it's really just laying out your goals and your expectations clearly as a buyer to say, this is what I'm interested in. Is it existing carbon-free energy in the market? Is it incremental new renewable energy that can be brought in through these types of agreements? What does that look like? And then choosing a supplier as a strategic partner that will help you get there. Then on the flip side, as an energy supplier, I think it's really important to be able to, take all these data streams. So Chris alluded to that. There's a ton of data that needs to be crunched to get to these hourly numbers of how much carbon-free energy you have in each hour. And so I think really being able to process all that data, pull it into a transparency platform, enable carbon insights, that's been really important to Microsoft. And I think that will be really important to other consumers in the market. And then lastly, I mean, on this energy tag point, I think we really need an entire ecosystem evolution to be able to get to a point where we have hourly energy instruments that we can claim and we can trade in the market. So granular certificates is kind of an end goal of how we can claim hourly carbon-free energy. And we need the standards, we need the regulations to update in order to be able to get there. So it's really a multi-sided problem with a lot of different stakeholders, but everyone needs to be hands on deck to get there.
Thanks, Taylor. Absolutely, fully agree. And just to clarify, also, there's sometimes a misconception that hourly matching can only be done by PPAs or through PPAs. And I know that some people in the audience might not be able to sign them by the nature of their business. We've done projects with hourly matching with regular electricity supply contracts. And that's because some energy suppliers are willing to dedicate a specific renewable energy plant to a consumer, and we can do the matching from there. I don't know if you wanted to add anything there, Taylor.
No, that's exactly right. So these energy supply agreements that I'm talking about are our retail energy supply agreements, typically 2 to 3 years. And really it's just delivering the megawatt hours that we need to our data center. And in addition, purchasing guarantees of origin that back up that hourly carbon-free energy that's being delivered to us. So not necessarily a 10, 15-year commitment like a PPA.
Super interesting. And in the future, who knows, maybe we start seeing the concept of buying unbundled hourly energy attribute certificates. So let's see where the market design goes. Fantastic. You already mentioned the topic of digitization, Taylor. Let me hand over to Brian to hear what were your challenges as Google to get the right data in place, and how are you solving them?
Yes, that's a good question. I mean, data and digital technologies are really important enablers of this more kind of granular temporal matching. As we try to get smarter about managing variable renewables. So we tend to think about 3 categories of data that are needed to plan and implement and measure a 24/7 goal. The first is forecasting and planning data. So we need to be able to forecast 5, 10 years out what the future grid mix looks like in order to inform our renewable energy purchasing today. So when we evaluate a transaction, a new solar project or a portfolio of projects, we evaluate them against 2 metrics, what we call a kind of carbon impact score or a carbon abatement score, looking at, okay, if we go for this project, what is the sort of lifetime emission saving and also how it contributes to that overall carbon-free energy score, getting to that 100% score. So there's a lot of data needed there. The second category is data for managing and optimizing your own resources. So energy market data to help us manage our assets, including our load flexibility. So for example, at Google, we've developed a sort of load shifting platform for our data centers, which we call Carbon Intelligent Compute, which allows us to move certain non-urgent compute tasks from times when there's a lot of fossil fuel generation on the grid to times when there's an abundance of renewable energy in the grid. And we can also move these tasks between data centers as well. And this allows us to sort of squeeze out that extra percentage of carbon-free energy in every hour. But we need a lot of market data to implement that. And then the third category is data, and this is, Taylor spoke about this, data for measuring and tracking progress, something that's really essential for this transparency piece. So stuff like meter data, measuring your hourly load, or data on what your renewable energy assets are doing in any hour. A lot of this data is available in Europe through data hubs, but it's very patchy in other places of the world. So there's a lot of work to be done. The other area is sort of certification, which is really key. We mentioned hourly guarantees of origin. So yeah, I think this, like, we're working at least in Google to try and fill in these gaps and make that data and those tools more accessible. Whether it's we're working with Flexidao, as you know, Joan, to develop this tool, the CFE score tool for clean energy buyers, so that they can estimate their CFE score looking at today. So this tool is a great door opener for companies looking into 24/7. We're also partnering with Electricity Map to help make granular grid mix data and carbon data available. But then I think the key piece is what Taylor mentioned, which is service providers who are coming into the market and providing the solutions and taking the pain out of gathering all of this data and shepherding it. So yeah, I think we're starting to see those gaps filled in, and of course we need more work on the policy side as well to make sure this data is available in every market.
Thanks, Brian. That was very interesting, and indeed, there's tools that can help estimate your carbon-free energy score. We're going to publish our work done together with Google there. It will be available this month. We'll leave a link in the chat also for any company interested. It's basically a tool in which you can input a couple of data points and get an estimation of what your carbon-free energy score can look like, and this can already help you draw a line to then go to your leadership team and explain what's your point of departure. And let me use that phrase to ask you, Taylor, if there's anyone in the audience that has seen some interest in 24/7, but is still doubting on how to position the message towards its leadership team, what kind of arguments do you think would work best for him or her?
Sure. So I think Brian hit on a lot of the key points earlier, like cash flow at risk, managing risk, et cetera. But maybe I'll take this from a carbon perspective. So at a very high level, what we're seeing at Microsoft is we see the risk of climate change and the risk that poses to our business and the cost that poses to our business as much higher than whatever cost we are spending right now to implement these decarbonization strategies. So at a very high level, like, that is what is motivating us towards these decarbonization goals. On a more granular level, I would say the way that we think about this is, how do you maximize your procurement dollars to have the greatest carbon impact? So how do you get the biggest bang for your buck when you are spending your procurement dollars? So the way that we've traditionally done power purchase agreements, where when we have these annual renewable energy goals, that really incentivizes us to drive to the lowest cost per megawatt hour for our renewable energy contracts. When that is the metric that you are optimizing around, you're driving a lot of development in places and times that renewable energy might not be needed or might not have the greatest impact. So like taking Texas, for example, we don't necessarily need another wind project in West Texas. But when you start to look more granularly, we see that time matters for carbon abatement, and we see that location also matters for carbon abatement. So Microsoft has done this pilot with Resurety and this project with Resurety, where we've looked at ERCOT and looked at the granular carbon impact at all of the nodes on the grid, and looked at the impact that renewable energy generation has at each of those nodes. And we found that some locations have twice the carbon abatement value than other locations for renewable energy generation. So what I'm trying to say here is these goals are really helping us get way more granular on data across time and across location, which is something that Microsoft really thinks we need to focus on. And they're helping us identify the projects that we can invest in to maximize carbon impact, the other operational actions that we can take in terms of load shifting or other things to maximize carbon impact. And really, we see the value of these types of granular data and granular strategies in helping us maximize the value of our procurement dollars.
Thanks, Taylor. And in terms of data access, if I can add to that, that's obviously not easy, but specifically in Europe, there are some data hubs available where companies can access their hourly metering data in an easier way. And we have published a free white paper where we explain that in more detail. If anyone in the audience is interested, we will also leave in the chat the link to access that. Great. Fantastic. So let's go.
Yeah. Johan, if I could just go back one moment to kind of connect two dots that both Brian and Taylor made, which I think are really helpful with kind of thinking about adopting a goal. From our perspective, as a co-location provider, as I mentioned earlier, we pass through power to our clients, and we also pass through the cost of power to our clients. So we are very focused on controlling our cost of power, because ultimately we need to be competitive in this space. It's one of our largest expenses. I would say adopting a 24/7 clean energy goal does not require you necessarily to pay more money. We've adopted the goal, and we've started the journey by recognizing where we're at in terms of our progress towards fully decarbonizing our footprint. And we've given ourselves a generous timeline to 2040 to get 100%. I think the pace at which we're able to make progress will be governed by the available technology solutions and costs to help us continue to enhance towards 100%. But simply adopting the goal didn't cost us a premium at all. We will continue to focus on delivering the most impactful, lowest cost energy to our clients. And as we become aware of where those unmet hours are that are highly fossil based still, we will seek to invest and find ways to help accelerate those technologies, those solutions. We will do that only at the pace at which it works within our total energy program costs. So it is certainly an approachable target to have. There's certainly an abundance of providers now emerging in the retail supply space, like NG or NRG in the US, that are delivering products that are 24/7 oriented. It's like these are products and solutions now that exist, and you don't have to be a very sophisticated energy buyer or have a tremendous load in order to have access to these retail solutions. They're out there. But the 2 points I wanted to connect were, I think more and more organizations are recognizing that there is a cost of carbon in the world. So carbon represents risk, I think, to a lot of businesses, whether it represents a reliance on fossil fuels or whether it just represents the potential for future cost exposure for taxes. I think carbon is a proxy for risk, and risk ultimately is a proxy for cost. So I think the more that we can focus on how we use our energy strategy to decarbonize, we are also de-risking and also reducing potential future cost risks as well. So cost and carbon are very connected in our business.
Thanks for adding that, Chris. I think that's helpful for many companies that might not want to go at a premium for now, but might still want to start in this journey by understanding your point of departure. So that was very helpful. Great. And you already started to mention, Chris, topics related to the future. Brian, maybe let's close this panel now with a last outlook towards the future. What is your expectation on how carbon-free electricity will evolve in 2022 and in 5 years from now?
Yeah, okay, so I guess unsurprisingly, I think the 24/7 is a very bright future. I think in 2022, we're going to see significant adoption from buyers, and importantly, not just data centers. So I know the title of this webinar is data centers. 24/7 is being adopted by corporate buyers across the spectrum, but it's also institutions, it's public sector organizations, it's municipalities. In the US, we've seen the executive order. And in fact, last week, we saw the US Department of Defense and General Service Administration announce that they're beginning the process of supplying themselves with 24/7 CFE. We're also going to see that ecosystem of energy utilities and service providers moving into the 24/7 space. And I think if I could leave you all with one takeaway, it's that if you're interested in 24/7 and you think you have something to contribute, I'd encourage you to seek out the United Nations 24/7 Carbon-Free Energy Compact that you mentioned at the start there, Joan, which is a coalition committed to furthering 24/7 with more than 50 signatories now and growing. So I'd strongly encourage you to check that out and join the movement.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brian. So let's leave some time for Q&A. We have 10 minutes left. Before we start the questions and answers, let me just add that we are seeing more and more appetite for education on 24/7 to spread the adoption. As Brian said, that's what we hope to see in the coming months and years. So we're going to put in the chat also a link to a quick survey to see what kind of education would help you as an audience to move forward. Great. So let's start with the Q&A. So our first question is actually for Google. Does Google invest in long-term energy storage, such as hydrogen?
Yes, so actually in that paper I mentioned, our metrics and methodologies paper on 24/7, we set out the sort of portfolio of technologies that we're kind of considering as part of carbon free. And yes, hydrogen and long duration storage are part of them. And in fact, it's one of the applications that we're kind of looking at hydrogen for, but also, potentially has a role in cleaning up our on-site backup generation. So yes, they're certainly part of the mix.
Thanks, Brian. Another question by Michael Pariser. How do you manage the cost expectations among your customers for 24/7 renewables?
Sorry, Johan, was that? I guess I'll take that one. I'm not sure if that was for me or not. But so our commitment is to continue to focus on the lowest cost energy supply and most consistent prices we can get. We think that's the energy value we bring as a large energy buyers, to focus on long-term, low-cost energy. We actually believe the ability to start delivering a 24/7 clean energy score to our customers is a value add. So we're focused on this. We're going to go after getting to 100%. We're going to be able to tell our customers along the way where their footprint is as part of that journey when they move to an Iron Mountain facility.
Thanks, Chris. That's interesting to see the customer visibility element as a differentiation point also, and how we can help. Fantastic. Let me jump. Another one for you, Brian. Is the link to that report you were talking about during your first intervention going to be shared? I guess it's talking about the Princeton report. Yeah.
I think someone dropped it in the chat.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I can share it.
Yeah, I think there was appetite for that from the audience. Fantastic. Great. There's also a question for us as Flexidao. Did Energy Web collaborate with our solutions? Indeed. So we're part of the Energy Web ecosystem. The Energy Web Foundation is trying to promote open source tools based on blockchain technology for accelerating a clean power grids. And we do use their blockchain technology, their blockchain infrastructure. So yes. There's a question, I don't know, maybe for you, Taylor, on how do you drive the lowest cost possible for reliable power at the meter? There's mentions on different grids that it might change between Germany and California in this question. I don't know if there's any input you'd like to give there.
Sure. So I guess this is about lowest cost at the meter at our data centers. And so, I mean, really there, it's just Microsoft has an energy purchasing strategy where we are typically looking at market-based rates. So really essentially taking all of the costs that you would spend on trading or managing that portfolio and allowing us to be market exposed. And so we contract for that type of energy supply through our retail energy suppliers. And that's also where we turn to for these 24/7 renewable or carbon-free energy supply agreements. So I kind of on two sides, it's a cost management strategy and also a strategy for driving carbon-free energy, driving insights into our energy supply.
Thanks, Taylor. And I see there's a lot of interest to know more on the cost element because someone is asking if there's any estimate of this premium price that someone has talked about in a broad range. Would any of you dare to mention anything there, or would we leave it for the Stanford and other reports documents?
I'll say that we're not paying a premium for a 24/7 clean energy solution today. We're also being very careful with the how aggressive we are with trying to get to 100%. So we're taking a very measured approach. It's not creating a premium. It doesn't cost anything extra to ask your retail provider to say, I want to know where my clean energy came from, and I want to know how well matched it is to my consumption. And if anything, we've spent some money with some consultants and advisors to help us do some math, but that's not an energy cost. That's just us kind of understand where we're at in the journey.
Yeah, and I just add that I think the Princeton paper might have something quantitative on that. But I'd echo what Chris said, and also I'd emphasize or reiterate the piece about high 24/7 type products can help mitigate risk as well. And you sort of have to think of that bigger picture, especially in the context of very, very high and volatile electricity prices at the moment. So that's an important factor as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. Let me just insert one more note here. So, I mean, I think that we all have to have some humility. Certainly we do. Like, we're at the start of this journey, as Chris is talking about. There's a lot that we don't know and a lot yet to learn. And so I think we've seen research like coming out of RMI, for example, that the last maybe 10% of 100% carbon-free energy goal is going to be harder, more expensive. Like, that's where the rubber is really going to meet the road. And I think as things progress, as we continue to move into the future on this journey, that's where we'll really be focusing on driving scale, trying to decrease costs at scale, so that we can really get to 100% in a cost-effective manner.
Thanks, guys. There's a question related to data storage and how to verify it on the blockchain. I guess that's maybe more for us as Flexidao. So first of all, for data monitoring, you don't need blockchain. So understanding how production is linked to consumption can be done with pretty much any software tool. Indeed, there is the ongoing debate on how to have a certification system that links to the current energy attribute certificate scheme. And we believe that blockchain technology can be a very strong enabler for that, to drive at a cost-effective way a certification system on an hourly basis. We think that it can act as a digital notary. And so we use that technology today to issue these granular hourly certificates and to link them to the energy attribute system as a temporary voluntary effort that companies can do to support their claims. And auditors are checking that it is verifiable and immutable. There's also a question related to technologies, which I think is quite interesting. So what are the most promising technology-based solutions that you're seeing emerge for 24/7 carbon-free energy? If you'd like to specify a bit more there.
I think it will be a portfolio of solutions, first of all. So we're certainly recognizing the value of low impact hydro in certain parts of the US where that's available, the value of potentially for storage to help us meet some of the really small wind hours that we're starting to see exist that are unmatched by clean energy. So I think geothermal has got huge potential, but oftentimes these solutions are very location specific, whether it's wind, geothermal, low impact hydro. So it needs to be a portfolio, and storage will need to become part of the ultimate solution.